Now you can see the plate that we just removed. Just like the other large plate, there's another O-ring in the groove of the plate right here. Make sure that O-ring is there and make sure it's intact and it's not broke. If it is broke, you're going to have to replace it. Right here is the inner pilot. This is the tip of the inner pilot. Okay? The guts of the inner pilot are from the other side. To get to it, we are going to have to separate the two plates. To separate these two plates, flip it over and you'll see the heads of the 4 screws. You're going to want to secure this plate, and with the same Allen wrench as we used for the top screws, you're going to want to break these loose. Now these may be pretty tight, so you may have to give it a good whack on your wrench. These I already loosened up a little bit ahead of time to make it easier. But once you get them loose, then just unscrew the 4 of them out. Take the 4 screws out, put the screws off to the side. With the screws out, these two plates will separate. They may be stuck together from use, and you just may need to tap this plate, tap it from the back side, or you could even stick a small screwdriver in between the two plates, pry them apart. But once you get them apart, the second plate will just come off. Now this plate, you could go ahead and just put it off to the side. This is the smaller of the two. Now, keep in mind which side is which. One side has a counterbore hole, and it has a little part of another inner pilot sticking through it. Okay? This would be considered the top side of it. And then you have the bottom side, which just has 4 holes, and it has a small raised section in the center. As you can see, it's raised just a little bit. This center section that's raised is used when you're putting this back together and you're putting the two plates back together. This side is going to face towards the other plate, and it's going to face towards the bearing side. You see the bushing that's inside here. As you can see in the center of this plate, there is a gold color bushing. It's a bronze bushing, and when it goes back together, that center part is going to go towards, the bronze bushing, and then as far as which way it spins, you're going to line up all 4 of the fittings. There's 4 fittings there. You don't want it to be like this. You want the fittings to all be lined up. And with the fittings lined up, those 4 holes will line up through here into the bottom plate. But for now, this plate is just going to get set off to the side because there's nothing we're going to do with it. You may want to wipe your plate down, clean it, because it might have some residue oil, grease, or dirt on it, and you just, as long as you have it apart, you might just want to clean it down. Then set it off to the side. This plate, you're going to want to do the same thing. Take it, wipe it down with a rag, clean it, clean both sides. Remember, on the one side, you have the O-ring that's in there. Make sure you don't lose that O-ring or it doesn't fall out. Here is a drawing of the interpilot that we are going to replace. This is a part number P1730, as you can see in the lower right-hand corner. That is the Terco part number when ordering this part, P1730. In this kit, you have several parts. All of the parts are going to be replaced when rebuilding the interpilot. Here you can see this is a picture of the interpilot, how it will look when it is assembled inside of the plate. This is the assembly broken down. It is made up of a small pin, a white colored plastic spool, a small spring. There are 4 small brown colored O-rings, 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 3 gold colored small spacers. Here's 1, 2, 3. There's an aluminum cap and a snap ring. The aluminum cap, which is item 3, and all of the parts are listed here by item number, part number, and the quantities that are used in a description. Item 3, which is a cap or referred to as a plug, is a small aluminum part. There are 2 sides to it. One side is flat, one side has a bevel to it. The bevel side is going to go down towards the spring. You will see the spring as you're putting the assembly together. Next, there's a snap ring. This is a very small snap ring. You must be very careful when installing the snap ring because it could break loose off of your snap ring pliers easily, and you could easily lose it. When you take the old interpilot assembly apart or disassemble from the plate, you want to save all the parts in case your kit is missing parts or in case you lose parts like the snap ring. You have the old one that you could use. I would not recommend using any of the old O-rings or the spool, but the snap ring, the gold spacers, the spring, that, if need be, can be reused. With the machine, you were supplied with a crimper toolkit. In this toolkit, there were 2 snap ring pliers. They both have red handles. One was larger than the other. The larger one is used for the snap rings that are holding in all of the bushings in each one of the plates. The smaller set, which has a very, very small point on the end of the snap ring pliers, is designed specifically for this snap ring. This is the only thing this tool is used for. You should not be using this snap ring pliers for anything else or you will break them. If you break them, it can be difficult to find a pair of snap ring pliers small enough for this snap ring. This is the snap ring pliers that we supplied you with. The tip is very small. I can't even get a close-up on it without it being blurred in the video. But this is the snap ring pliers that you will use, that we supplied you with. Next, we're going to take a look at the actual parts. These are all of the actual parts that are used in the assembly. As I pointed out, this is the pin. These are the 4 small brown O-rings. These are the 3 small gold spacers. There is a white spool. There's a spring. There is the aluminum plug or cap. And then there is the small snap ring. Next, we will remove the old interpilot from the plate. Now, this is my working surface. I have a tabletop with a big piece of white paper over it. Here's my plate. I'm going to take the plate and I'm going to hang it off the edge of the table just a little bit. as you could see. The reason for this is the little pin protrudes through the other side of the plate. When we're reassembling this, if I don't have this part hanging off, the pin will not push through the plate. And when we put the pin in, we need the pin to push through the plate and stick out the other side. So it cannot sit or lay flat on a table. So I'm going to put this just like that and just hang it off a little bit. I'm going to try and get a close-up of this so you can see exactly what I'm doing. Here you can see the ends of the snap ring. Now I'm going to need to get that snap ring out. So I'm going to keep my thumb halfway over the snap ring, and then I'm going to use the snap ring pliers on the other side to remove the snap ring like that. Once the snap ring is off, put it off to the side. Now you should easily be able to remove the cap. And then you're going to need a pick, and you can get out the spring. And then you're just going to start taking out all of the other components. So that's the first O-ring, spacer. Once you get out the first O-ring and spacer, then you're going to have to flip it over and push out the pin pushing all the way through, and then you'll be left with, that's the pin and the spool, two parts. Put them off to the side, then come back to your plate. At this point, it does not need to be hanging off the end of the table. And we're going to pick out another washer. Another spacer. Another washer, another spacer. Sometimes two will come out at a time. And then one more washer. That's it. Now, we have all of our parts that we just took out right here. As you can see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 washers, 1, 2, 3 spacers, the spool, the pin, the spring, the cap or plug, and the snap ring. Okay, over here we have all of our new stuff, and we're going to insert it, everything into this hole right here. Now, when we start this, we're going to have to take the plate and we're going to hang it off the end of the table like I was talking about, because we need that pin. When we put the pin in first, it's got to drop in and it's got to come all the way through. So this is the first part we're going to put in. It's going to be the pin. And we're just going to drop that in there. Going to get our pointer and just push it to make sure that it's sitting all the way down there. Next, we're going to get a little bit of grease. I'm using the Magnaloop grease. It's the light green colored grease. I believe you have some. If you don't, just find a light grease. Just put a little bit on your finger. Spread it around on your finger a little bit, and it will enable you to help pick up the first O-ring and it won't fall off your finger. So just take an O-ring, put it in the hole, just like that. Then get a spacer, push it right down on top. Then another O-ring, right down there. Then another spacer, push it in. Maybe get a little bit more grease on your finger. Another O-ring, push it down there. The third and last spacer. And the fourth and last O-ring. So we've put in 4 O-rings and 3 spacers. Now I always get something and I just kind of push it down, something that fits in there. Just kind of tuck them down there a bit, just like that. A little grease in there. Now you're going to take your spool. Now there's 2 sides to the spool. There's the closed side and there's an open side. The open side, this side, should be facing up. So we're going to take that and we're going to stick it right in the center and just push it down. Then I'm going to get something just to push down that spool. Don't push too hard if you're using something pointy, because you don't want to puncture a hole in there. Just tap it down a little bit. Next, you're going to get your spring. Put the spring inside the spool, just like that. Then we're going to get our cap. And like I told you on the cap, you have a flat side, that's the flat side, and there's a beveled side. That side has the bevel. The beveled side is going to go down towards the spring, just like that. Now, you're compressing the spring when you push down on it. Okay, now the next part may be difficult to see because my hands may get in the way, but so you understand, what I'm doing is, this is the snap ring. The snap ring is going to go on here, and what I'm going to do is, I'm going to hold the snap ring down with my finger on one side and kind of push everything downward. And then with the snap ring pliers, I'm going to grab it and I'm going to squeeze it. But now as I squeeze it just a little bit, I'm pushing down, and then I'm going to use something else like a small screwdriver to push the other side down. And I want to get everything in there. And I put my finger back over it like that, because you never want to take your finger off this area, because if that snap ring's not in properly, it will fly away. Now I'm going to change hands. Now, by looking at the snap ring and the distance between the 2 eyes of the snap ring, I could tell if it's spread apart enough, which means that it's in the groove. So before you take the snap ring out, look at it. Before you take it apart on the old one, look at the space between the eyes. Your space is going to be roughly about a quarter of an, about 250 thousandths space in between. I'm not sure what that is in millimeters, but that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that same spacing when you put the new one in. And looking at this, it looks pretty good, like I have that spacing. Now, with my finger over the whole assembly, I'm going to lift it. I'm going to push it on the table, and that little nipple part right there, that's going to push in and have spring pressure. So I'm going to put the part down on the table and push it down, and I want to feel that there's some spring there, that my pin is going in and out. This pin right here, it should go in and out like that with some spring pressure. If it doesn't go in at all, or it doesn't have spring pressure, then something was assembled wrong. So that's the pin side when we're done. And that's trying to get a close-up here for you. That's the snap ring in there, and you can see the two eyelets, the end of the snap ring where your pliers are going to go. Next, we're back to our plate. This is the larger plate, and we have our other plate, the one that we put off to the side that we didn't do anything to. The two plates that go together. Remember, we talked about the center hub here, how it's going to go over the bushing, and then we're going to line up the 4 fittings, put a little grease on your bolts, and drop it in, line it up, and start to screw it in. Then we're going to secure the screws. See the way that I do this. If you notice, I'm using my fitting as a brace here so that this whole assembly can't spin on me, because I'm going this way with it. Get these tight. And then the two plates are assembled back together. Again, be sure your O-ring here is in place. It's in there as it should be. This is the O-ring I'm talking about. Just make sure it's in the groove properly. Okay, next we have our plate assembly, the two plates together. Now we're going to find our hole in the plate, which if you hold a plate like this, it's this one right here, that we're going to screw our non-rotating rod back into. That was the long rod that we screwed out before. So we're just going to screw that in. Make sure you get it in the right hole. I'm going to set this down so I could screw it in there. Then you could put a 3/16 wrench in the top right here. A 3/16. That's the size you could use to tighten it up. Put it in like that. Tighten it up in there. Then you take the whole part and line up the non-rotating rod with the bushing in the back. Slide it down and just let it sit on top of the shaft. That's the top of this shaft right here. That's the main shaft. Right there. It's just going to sit on top of there. And then you could start screwing the shaft from the bottom so, you could tell, you could feel the plate is starting to get secured on. Once it gets tight enough where you can't do it by hand anymore, then you'll go back to your spanner wrench on the bottom of the shaft and you'll tighten it up. Make sure it's tight. You'll get to a point where it will not screw in anymore. It'll just, the spanner wrench will just stop. That's the end of the threads. There's no more threads. So don't try and force it. Don't try and put any kind of extension on here to get it tighter. Just as tight as you could with the spanner wrench, and then that's it. And then we're going to come back up here. And if you remember, we raised this up like this, and we put something in here, like a spacer, and drop that down, and then we're going to get a 1/8 Allen wrench to tighten down that set screw right here that we talked about. That's the one that locks down the set screw, puts pressure against the plastic ball and then against the threads to keep this from unscrewing off of the shaft. Here's a better look at the hole. Just gonna stick our Allen wrench in here, find the set screw, and then tighten it up. Just like that. Next, we're going to get our 4 screws that attaches the guard, and we're going to get those started. Make sure you pull out your spacer, whatever you used, raise your guard up, put in the first screw, and again that's a 3/16 Allen wrench. Go ahead and get those in. Two. That's 3. And the one in the back is 4. Get those all secured. Okay, next we're going to reinstall our crimper piston, cylinder, and shaft. That was the long shaft that we pulled out. Now before I go ahead and put this in, that same grease we used, the Magnalube, I'm just going to take some and I'm going to put it on the shaft. Just rub it up and down on there a little bit. Get a little bit on the end. Okay, then we're just going to take this and set it in there. Just let it drop down. Now, don't let this cylinder slide off the piston, okay, or else you're going to have to tuck the U-cups back inside the cylinder, so just don't let that happen. Then at the bottom, at the bottom end, going that way, the shaft coming through, the shaft that you're going to screw your head back onto, your crimping head back onto, stick your finger up into it and drop this down, and it'll rest on the top of your finger. And then with it resting on your finger, push that down a little bit and just let it seat down, and the cylinder will seat down right into the O-ring that's in that groove right there. Okay, next you can see here's a close-up. This is the top of the cylinder here that we just put in. We're going to take our last plate and we're going to put it on, and we're going to gently work it over. You don't want to force it on in the center here because there's a U-cup in there that could end up getting rolled. Okay, and you don't want to roll the U-cup. So when you put this on, you could even put a little grease up on this edge right here. And just take this and gently work it on. Just drop it down. Just like that. Once you get it there, the big fitting will be on your right hand side, and there will be 2 little fittings on the left hand side. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to put our long bolts back in, line it up. Now when you tighten up these bolts, there's no reason to go too tight with them. You want to make them good and snug, but you don't have to really pull the wrench too hard, because if you do, you're sandwiching these two plates together. And remember, on the inside of both of these plates, there's an O-ring that this cylinder is pushing against. If you squeeze these two together too much, okay, by tightening these up, what's going to happen is this cylinder, the edge of it, is going to cut into the O-ring. And you could end up splitting the O-ring into two pieces, which could later on cause a leak. So I'm going to just a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there, a little bit there, and then just a little bit more. And that should be it. Many times I see leaks right here because these bolts have been made too tight. And when they're made too tight, like I said, you cut the O-ring. Okay, the next part is going to be putting all of our air hoses back on. So we're going to start with the two right here. This top one is number 1, this is number 2. Your hoses should be marked, number 1 and number 2. Okay. Then we're going to go to the other side, where we're going to have 6 hoses to attach. Now these are marked. We have 12. We have 13. We have 6. We have 9. Then we have one marked 8. 8 comes from the switch on the side. And then there's one last one marked number 7. On the side of the cylinder, directly above the fitting or below the fitting, there's a number that's stamped on the black plate. Like on these, there's a number that's stamped on the black plate so that you know what number port that hose goes to. So now these are all hosed up. Now we're going to come to the bottom here. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to loosen up our clamps on the side, the 2 clamps, and we're going to turn our adjusting handle, the handle up at the top there, right there. We're going to turn that to raise the crimper up, because we don't have enough room to work at the bottom here. A little bit more. Okay, now we can lock down our clamps. Okay. Next, we're going to put our bushing back in. Don't forget to put the bushing in before you put your wedge back on. If you put the wedge on, once you put the wedge on, you will not be able to get the bushing back on. So bushing first, wedge second. So get your 3/16 Allen wrench. Go up a little bit more. Had to go up a little bit more, couldn't fit my wrench in. Okay. Now start screwing on your wedge. Don't worry about this bushing dropping. That's fine. Once the wedge is all up there, it'll fall in place. Once it starts getting tight, put a wrench on the top of the mandrel and lock it down. Again, don't worry about this bushing dropping out. That's fine. Once the head is put back up there, the head will hold it all in place. Okay. Next, we're going to take our head. This is the upper part of the head. We're going to screw it on. Okay, once it gets to a point where it seems tight, then you got to get your spanner wrench again on there and tighten it up. Once you get that tight, find your threaded hole right there. Put your 1/8 Allen wrench in there and snug it down. That's the same as the other one where there's a set screw that tightens against the nylon ball, which tightens against the threads. You never want to lock down a set screw directly on the threads. Now we're going to come back with our bell housing. You all know what this is. This is just going to get pushed back up there, locked in place. Now we have one air hose left, which should be number 14. That's going to go right on that fitting. And then we have our vacuum line, which is the big one. That one has to be reattached also. Right there. Plug that in. At this point, you would go ahead and you would reinstall your gassing poppet valve, screw that into the side, and you would reinstall your reclaim valve, which is that one with the other two hoses on it. And we screw that into the other side of the head. Once all of that is put back in, then the assembly of replacing the inner pilot is complete. At this point, you would then go through and set the head up for your can as you normally would. This concludes the training of how to replace the crimper end of stroke inner pilot. Thanks.